Make America again. Okay. Wonderful. We're live. Yeah, make America Republican again. Hello, my name is Yuri Kofner. I'm an economic policy advisor for the AfD, the Alternative for Germany Party. And I heartily welcome you to our online live discussion, which is also mainly for German audiences, on the Republican presidential candidates. There will be elections next year, on the culture war in the United States, and on US politics in general. And for this discussion, I'm very honored and very delighted to have two wonderful guests. First, Gavin Wax. He's the president of the New York Young Republicans Club, the oldest and largest young Republican club in the United States. Among his many achievements, Gavin is the ambassador for Turning Point USA and a frequent guest on the Fox News. Gavin, nice to have you.
It's great to be here. I'm looking forward to our discussion.
Thank you. And also, I would like to introduce Shane TREJO. I hope I didn't butcher your last name. He's the Grassroots director for the Republicans for National Renewal. He's a long-time independent journalist, and his work has been promoted among many, such as former Fox News host Tucker Carlson, and even by the President Donald J. Trump himself. Shane, it's wonderful to have you.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. So let's step right in. But before we do that, I would like to ask each of you to quickly and briefly introduce yourselves. Where you're from in the United States, how did you come into politics, and could you please tell the audiences about the organizations that you represent and which goals they have? Gavin, could you please start?
Absolutely. Well, again, thank you for having me. My name is Gavin Wax. I'm the 76th president of the New York Young Republican Club. We're the oldest and largest young Republican club, frankly, in the country. We've had the honor to build strong ties with the AfD in Germany, including signing, I believe, the first formal cooperation agreement between a Republican Party affiliate and the AfD with the Junge Alternative, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. My day job, I serve as the executive director for the National Constitutional Law Union. We represent Americans whose constitutional rights and liberties are being violated primarily by both private and state actors. We're doing a lot of work on January 6th and other cases as it pertains to the vax mandate, et cetera. I'm a contributor and columnist for a few different outlets, Daily Caller, Town Hall, et cetera. And I have a book coming out this year entitled The Emerging Populist Majority, which talks about, Republican populist politics and how they are changing there's a political realignment in this country, particularly with the Trump movement. And I've known Shane for quite a while. We've been good friends going back many years. So it's great to be on with him. And I guess we kind of both got our start, and I'm sure Shane will talk about this too, supporting candidates such as Ron Paul quite a few years ago, more paleo-libertarian, more non-interventionist. And I think that's sort of morphed into what I'm doing and what Shane's doing at Republicans for National Renewal, sort of this populist America First movement. But anyway, it's great to be here, and I see a lot of parallels between what's happening in Germany and what's happening in the United States. And I think the Republican Party and the AfD have a lot to learn from each other, and we can certainly help each other both grow electorally and politically in our respective nations.
Thank you. Spoken like a real diplomat. Shane, please tell us about yourselves, where you're from, and about what you do and the goals of your organization.
Absolutely. So my name is Shane TREJO. I am from the state of Michigan in the United States, a battleground state where there was an area where Trump won in 2016. And then in 2020, a lot of suspicious activity was happening in polling centers with ballots being produced seemingly out of thin air at the dead of night. And, we lost in 2020, officially lost in 2020, and it's going to be a huge battleground in 2024. So in addition to being an activist in Michigan and being on the ground there, I'm also the grassroots director of Republicans for National Renewal. We're an organization that we foster harmony between the United States Republican Party and then organizations abroad like AFD as well. And we've seen the Republican Party has been, bereft. It's been very dismal for many years until President Trump showed up. So now we're trying to build upon that, taking it away from organization that represents the corporate elite and represents the globalists into one that's more populist and nationalist. And we want to learn from people in Europe who, have, really been more on the forefront of populism and nationalism longer than we have. And we want to kind of create a global synergy of different right-wing groups. And we've done that. We've hosted events in areas like Hungary, and we're hosting one in Serbia coming up in November. And we've met as many great people from throughout the world. They want to demoralize us. They want us to be feel like we're atomized, feel like we're losing, that their globalist new world order is inevitable. But it's really not. When you go to these conferences, when you see that in every country there is a rising right-wing populist movement that is ready to come into power and renew the nation state and stop this globalist new world order from happening. So very happy to be here. And like Gavin said, we've been involved for a very long time, since the Ron Paul days, the Tea Party days, when it was more about free markets and constitution, which is all well and good, but without a nation, without a people who understand what a nation means, what the commonalities that bind us together, we can't have free markets, we can't have a constitution. So our kind of learning on that regard has come a long way, and we're happy to fight alongside the AFD and other groups, similar groups around the world.
Well, Shane, I'm very happy to have you and Gavin, because you're exactly saying the same things that we are saying here in Germany, and we want to, I think even more so, we want to learn the AfD, the German patriots, the right-wing patriots. We want to learn from the successes of the Republicans and right-wing freedom-loving circles in the United States, because, also a lot of the wokeism that we are starting to feel in Germany. Just one example, Drag Queen Hour, for example. You have been having that, 5 years ago already, 10 years ago, and it just started in Germany. But everything woke, everything bad, which starts in the United States, unfortunately, comes to us sooner or later. But also, your fight has started sooner than our fight, and so we can learn from you as well. But before, we will talk about that later. But first, now the main question, of course, is there will be presidential elections in the United States in 2024 in November, and I think it's not wrong to say that there are two main competitors: Donald J. Trump, of course, and Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida. What are their chances to become president, and what are the differences? They're saying different things. In Germany, there is also this view that maybe Ron DeSantis is a neocon, which means that he's supporting foreign interventions of the United States, not unlike George W. Bush did in his time. So could you please educate us and myself on this issue? What are the views of Ron DeSantis? What are the differences? What is his difference to Trump? And also, of course, what will change for Germany and what will change with the war in Ukraine if either Donald Trump or Ron DeSantis will become the next president of the United States? Gavin, if you could please start again.
Absolutely. I love that we're going to open up with Ron DeSantis. Obviously I'm a big Trump supporter, so I'm a little biased here, but we'll start with his electoral chances. I think he has no shot to become president ever, frankly, this cycle or otherwise. I think he's destroyed his political credibility, his future. He's wasted all his political capital on a very misguided run for president. I think in many cases, he was a paper tiger. He had a very good PR team, as Trump has stated. But honestly, once you begin to scratch at the surface, you realize that from a charisma standpoint, from a personal standpoint, he just doesn't have it. He's not the guy. He's not ready for the limelight. He'd be a fine governor, I'm sure. But at the end of the day, he's not ready for the presidential stage. He just doesn't have that sort of character, that force of personality to do it. And you also highlighted some of the ideological problems with him. I think he's, decent on some domestic policies. I think his views on trade, and particularly maybe on his views on immigration, I think he needs to really elaborate there on those issues more. I think in many ways he's much more run-of-the-mill Republican, establishmentarian in some of his domestic views, but certainly in his foreign policy, as you outlined with his neoconservatism, this is certainly the most troubling. Trump was the peace candidate. He was the peace president. We never saw anything like it in the last, generation, last several decades. Someone who wouldn't start a new war, who was trying to actively get American troops, bring them back home, who was willing to talk, to historic quote unquote enemies of the United States, making historic peace overtures to, say, North Korea, bringing about peace with the Abraham Accords, trying to prevent any aggression from Russia and any fighting in Europe. None of that happened under his watch. And we didn't start any new wars. We fought where we needed to fight. We walked tall and we carried a big stick, but it was not marching to the tune of the military-industrial complex. It's very clear that DeSantis would be a puppet of the Raytheons of the world. He would be a puppet of the Boeings of the world and all the other military contractors. It's very clear that he would like to see escalation vis-a-vis Russia. He would like to see escalation in Ukraine, all to the detriment not only of the United States, but certainly to our allies such as Germany. The war continuing in Ukraine is only going to bring more damage economically and in terms of the loss of life and physical destruction to Ukraine and Europe at large. This is a destabilizing conflict, and it needs to end. It needs to be brought to heel. We need peace. We need negotiations. And I truly do believe that Trump would get that peace deal arranged in very quick order. I think we have all the leverage we need as the United States, being the primary supplier of funds and weapons and material to Ukraine. If we were to, use that leverage, we could certainly extract peace agreements and force them to the table. I think it's been very clear that the Ukrainians would have been willing to make peace if it were not for the intervention of Brussels, London, and Washington. With the Trump administration, I think that would change the calculus and we would reach a peace agreement very quickly to the benefit of us all. But broadly speaking, DeSantis is just not the guy. He's a run-of-the-mill candidate. He is backed by the establishment. He's backed by the mega donors, the donor class, this neo-never Trump movement within the establishment that hates Trump, that hates the Trump movement, that hates populism. And he's really the Manchurian candidate on the right. He's the guy that's coming in who's going to, temper down the flames of populism, who's going to control this sort of renegade, rogue, out of control America First movement that the establishment and the elites cannot control. He's sort of trying to be the Trump without being Trump. He's trying to, say the right things when he needs to, but actually he's being very deceitful in how he goes about it. And I think he's being exposed as a fraud. And I think if you look at the people around him, the people who's supporting him, and his record in Congress and his record in terms of his past rhetoric, I think he represents a return to the pre-Trump GOP, the GOP of the Bush era, the GOP of the early 2000s, the GOP of the Iraq War. And I think it would be a regression. And I don't think he even has the chance to win in the general. There's only one candidate who could beat Biden, who could take back the White House, who's shown an ability to win states like Michigan, where Shane is from, and other blue wall states like Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, wherever. There's only one candidate who's grown the coalition, who's grown the tent, who has expanded the Republican movement he represents. So if we've seen by the polls, if we've looked at, the numbers in the general election, no one comes close to Trump. He's never polled this well. He never polled this well in 2016 or 2015. He never polled this way in 2020. So there's a lot of things to be hopeful for. I think he has the best path. And I think there's a lot of forces that are looking to ensure that DeSantis is the nominee, because they know if DeSantis is the nominee, the Democrats will win. So it's an uphill fight. It's dividing the party. I don't think DeSantis is going to win a single state in this primary. All the state level polls, the national polls, he's down big, down by 50 points. I mean, there's no historical comparison. I mean, Trump is a incumbent. He's the leader of the party. He has, overwhelming support in the party, 85, 90% support. Everyone's choice for second is Trump, whether they're a DeSantis supporter or a Nikki Haley supporter, whoever. They're all supporting Trump second. And it's very clear that they know there's no path for DeSantis unless something was to happen to Trump, unless Trump was to be, taken out, thrown in jail, the political persecutions. The DeSantis campaign rests on the notion that Trump can be taken out of the equation. He can't win on his own. He can't win against Trump head to head. And I think right now them staying in the race is designed to divide the party, to separate us, to keep us weaker, and bring us into a weaker position come the general election. So those are my views, strong as they may be. But I'm behind Trump, and I think he'll be winning very shortly.
Thank you, Gavin. Shane, do you agree with him?
Yeah, what he said basically. But let me add as well that Ron DeSantis built his whole career on being a Trump clone. He was the candidate who Trump dragged across the finish line. He would never have come close to becoming governor of Florida without President Trump endorsing him and rallying for him and sticking by him. And then once he got elected, he presented himself as a mini Trump. He was bombastic. He kind of tapped into the Trump formula. And that's why he became so popular among the pro-Trump base, was because he was seen as an extension of Donald Trump in Florida. And he did a very good job of it. And he won re-election by way more than he did when he was elected, because he kind of tapped into the Trump formula and was seen as kind of effectuating that, spreading, the America First movement from the White House into the states. So that's why he became very popular. But then as soon as he gained that popularity, he had many mainstream establishment consultants in his ear telling him, well, you're the guy. You are you can get rid of Trump, and you can be the president, and that your time is now, and you're Trump without all the negatives. So he listened to these establishment consultants who just wanted a meal ticket. They were, flushed out of Trump world. They had no way to make all the money that they usually make on these campaigns, because Trump realized these guys are bad news. They hitched a ride on the DeSantis wagon, and DeSantis let his ego get ahead of him, and he ran for president. And you look at when he first ran, after the midterms of last year, which were not good for Republicans. That's a whole other discussion as to why they weren't good. But as soon as the midterms were over, DeSantis won in Florida, and you look at the polls, he was as popular as, very popular, almost looked to be competitive with Trump. But in the months since, as Trump has campaigned, as the Biden administration has gotten even worse, and as the people remember how good things were under Trump, Trump has gone up in the polls steadily. And also, as DeSantis has hit the campaign trail without being able to mimic Trump, with having to position himself as, being the alternative to Trump, and adopting many of the never Trumper, neocon talking points to differentiate himself from Trump, he has gone down in the polls, and now he's closer to the rest of the pack than he is Trump. He's losing by 30, 40, 50 points in these polls. And now even the establishment, which saw him as their guy, they're looking to jump off the bandwagon and try to find someone else as the anti-Trump candidate. So the DeSantis campaign couldn't have went worse. DeSantis listened to the likes of Jeb Bush. He listened to the likes of Paul Ryan, these people who are just absolutely hated by the Republican base. He let his ego get the best of him. And now not only will he not be the nominee in 2024, but in 2028 and beyond, I don't think people will forget. They feel betrayed. They know DeSantis positioned himself as a mini Trump, and they see him as stabbing Trump in the back worse than anyone. So I feel like he's ruined his national ambitions for good. And we've kind of smoked out this traitor, this snake in the grass, who positioned himself in one way and then flipped and showed his true colors. So I think DeSantis's national career is over, and he's jeopardized his good work in Florida too with this fool's errand running against President Trump.
And I think we just also have some breaking news. The first national poll was just released, which shows DeSantis in third place behind Vivek Ramaswamy. This is from Kaplan Strategies. It was taken July 17th to July 18th and includes 800 likely voters with a margin of error of 3.5. It shows Trump at 48. It shows Ramaswamy at 12 and change. And then it shows below him DeSantis at 12 and change, but slightly below. So this is the first, as of this show, the first national poll that shows DeSantis slipping into third. I mean, this is massive. We've seen polls in New Hampshire, which is the second state in the primary, with DeSantis almost neck and neck with Christie. We are watching the destruction of DeSantis's political career in real time. Everything that Shane just said is true. He's a consultant driven, a focus group driven, fake artificial candidate. And the people are seeing it. The more he's campaigned, the more they've pushed away from him. And I think we're going to see him completely collapse. And before the first caucus, before the first primary, which is less than 6 months away, to Iowa. And his entire campaign is based on potentially winning Iowa. And Trump doesn't even need to win it. You know, Cruz won it in 2016, and Cruz still got destroyed in the primary. And Trump never polled this well in 2016. So we're watching in real time the destruction of Ron DeSantis and, say, the rise of Vivek Ramaswamy, whatever you think of him.
Okay, so you're very sure that Trump will win the primaries. He will be the main candidate, the one candidate of the Republican Party for the presidential elections. We talked about the Republican side. Let's talk about the Democrats, please, because, okay, no one in their right mind, no one believes in Sleepy Joe anymore. Not even his closest advisors believe in him having any chances of winning the elections. But there's someone new on the rise, and that's Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And, you know, I'm very surprised, I'm very astonished about the topics which he dares to talk about. He has this audacity. He talks openly about Operation Mockingbird. So, you know, when the CIA and might still influence media, what to talk about, what not to talk about. He openly talks about the role of the United States in the war in Ukraine. He recently talked about chemicals and their effects on gender dysphoria. You know, what he's saying about the climate narrative, what he's telling about the vaccines, and so on. So I'm sorry to say that, but for me, I have the impression he's a kind of Republican in disguise. I'm really interested in your views. What are your views on Robert F. Kennedy Jr.? And I know he's unlikely to become a president. He's unlikely to win. But still, is he fake, or what's going on? Can you please explain the phenomenon of Robert F. Kennedy Jr.? Shane, please, if you might start this time.
Well, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is showing a lot of courage to run as a Democrat. Again, like you said, I don't think he'll be the president, but he's a great spoiler. You know, he was on the Joe Rogan show, you know, talking about, you know, the problems with these vaccines and how, you know, the adverse effects are being, you know, hidden from the public, and how these so-called experts, these doctors who go on mainstream media shows, how they are misrepresenting the issue. And he challenged Dr. Hotez, who's one of the biggest vaccine pushers out there, to a debate. And, you know, watching him try to wiggle out of this debate, come up with any sort of excuse, which is really just cowardice, not to debate Robert F. Kennedy on the Joe Rogan show. It showed just how weak and cowardly and how scared these people are of alternative views, of, you know, having to face facts that they want to gloss over. So he's serving a great utility in how he's fighting against, you know, the establishment. I don't think he's going to gain traction in the Democrat Party because, as unfortunate as it is, there are millions of people in our country who are diehard, you know, pro-establishment, pro-globalism. They would vote for Sleepy Joe. They would vote for anyone who they're told to vote for. They probably still believe that Trump's a Russian agent. So these people they've been lulled into this false reality where they will vote for Sleepy Joe, and then couple that with the intense amount of fraud that, you know, happened in 2020. It's not been smoked out. It's been covered up. And it's going to be back with a vengeance in 2024. You know, COVID was rolled out in 2020 at the perfect time to enable, you know, widespread mail-in ballots, no accountability, no signature verification. So they did it in 2020. Don't be surprised when they do it in 2024. So I think they like having Sleepy Joe in there. They like having someone who's just a completely vacuous puppet who just follows orders and doesn't even have the ability to say no, to push back against the agenda that's coming down from on high. So I expect him to push Sleepy Joe, but you got to give RFK Jr. a lot of credit in being a wrench in this absurd and ridiculous and evil system, being a wrench in the gears of the Democrat Party and their totalitarianism and their extremism and their tyranny. And I would love to see a Trump Kennedy Jr. Ticket in 2024. Just Trump needs to go against the Republican elites too, and that would be the perfect ticket. And I think that would get a lot of people's eyeballs, on Trump Kennedy, and bring in a lot of independent and moderate voters who will realize that this is a ticket that's really opposing the regime, and it's not a Republican or Democrat ticket. This is America First ticket. So I'm hoping for Trump Kennedy.
Nicely said. Thank you. Gavin, do you agree? We don't hear you. You're muted still.
Sorry. Yes, I largely agree. I think RFK Jr. is a unique political figure. I think he represents sort of what the left was, or at least, more of the left was maybe 20, 30 years ago. They were anti-globalist. They were pro-peace. They were pro-free speech. They were skeptical.
The same in Germany, or similar in Germany. Yes.
Exactly. And this was a global phenomenon, represents people that were more skeptical of big institutions, of corporate interests, of big pharma, his talks on the vaccine. So I think he represents a lot of things that have now been taken on by the populist right. There's been a convergence between the populist left and the populist right on a lot of these issues. Sadly, I think there's a few issues that he's a little behind on, where he's still sort of a run-of-the-mill establishment liberal, things on, like, say, for example, affirmative action or gun control, things like this. But on the whole, he's probably one of the most refreshing candidates the Democrats have had in their primary in decades. And I'm glad he's running. I'm glad that there's at least a discussion. I'm glad that he's bringing thoughts and ideas to the table, particularly in their camp, which is very monolithic and very lockstep. And I don't think he has a shot, but I also think he's important because in states like, say, New Hampshire, which is an open primary, he'll pull votes away. He'll pull votes away from people like Ron DeSantis. He'll pull votes away from even, on the Democrat side and the Republican side, because people can vote for whoever. So he's going to play an important role. I would encourage him to run for third party, because I think historically, when you have an incumbent running for re-election, you have these third party candidates, they pull away from the incumbent. And if we see an incumbent face some third party challenges, whether it's Cornel West or whether it's an RFK ticket or whether it's a no labels ticket, they get 5 to 6% of the vote. I think that guarantees Trump wins. And I think that's what we saw in 2016. So I think he brings a lot of good things to the table. I think what he also represents is this new type of politicking. He's genuine. He's off the cuff. He speaks his mind. He could go 3 hours on Joe Rogan and just say whatever he wants to say. And he can answer questions, and there's a genuineness there. There's a realness there. And in the age of social media, people are looking for authenticity. They're looking for realness. They're not looking for phonies. They're not looking for people that are constructed by consultants, that are approved by focus groups and testing, which is Ron DeSantis. They're looking for people like Trump, like RFK, who are just their own people who speak their mind. That's the age of social media. It used to be you used to need a voice for radio. Then you needed to have a good face for television. Well, the age of social media, you need to have the authenticity that people can relate to you. And I think a lot of these candidates, either on the Dem side or on the Republican side, they're running a campaign from 20, 30 years ago. They're inauthentic. They're just pushing out, these stale talking points, these trite talking points, and people see through them. And that's why, even though I don't agree with RFK Jr. on everything, and I think, there's a lot of stuff he says that's fantastic, he comes out, he speaks from the heart, he's real, he's genuine, he's passionate. And I think that's what people are looking for in this day and age. And I think because of that, he's done very well. As far as a unity ticket is concerned, I think it could be interesting. I think it certainly could be interesting electorally, particularly if RFK is kept focused on a few areas, whether it's vaccines or foreign affairs and things like that, areas where we agree on him. I'm certainly open to it. We'll have to see, but I think it's certainly an interesting time. And I think it goes that people are looking for candidates, whether they're on the left or on the right, that are going against the establishment. Trump represents that on the right. RFK represents that on the left.
Well, first of all, I agree with both of you that he's refreshing, he's authentic. And also, you just said it, he is doing something which is very important for any democracy and for our debate culture, because this past 50, 20 years, the discourse has been moved to the left. So what you are allowed to say, what you're allowed to talk about, may it be ethnicity or crime or immigration or whatever, it has been moved by the media, by the establishment towards the left. And it was only the right-wingers, the Republicans in the United States, the AfD in Germany, which are trying to move this discourse, what you are allowed to talk about, what you're allowed to discuss, back to the center. Because we are right-wing, we try to move it back to the center. Of course, exactly for that, we are being attacked, because we want to increase democracy. increase the sphere of what you can talk about. And now people like RFK in the United States, and maybe if you heard about her, Sarah Wagenknecht, which is also like a similar, very special person from the German Left Party. She's, as you said, Gavin, similar old anti-imperialist left wing for the working people. Those politicians, they are now moving also from the left wing side. From an unexpected point of view, they're pushing this discourse back and they're helping us right-wingers, us conservatives, and they are supporting us in that we are actually right, that we are allowed to move this discourse back to the center, and that we are allowed to talk about certain topics. So I agree in that. But we have a few time, and I would like to move on, and I would like now to move in much more deeper waters, both in the figurative and in the real sense. And I'm just going to bombard you with this question now, and just want to see what you will say. Shane, or let's start with Gavin this time again. Gavin, who destroyed Nord Stream 2?
I think it was the United States that destroyed Nord Stream 2. I think we were the only people with the capability, technologically and otherwise, to do it, and I think we were the ones that had the most incentive to do it. I think it's a sad day that this happened, and then we acted against an ally, and then we acted in such an aggressive way, breaking all standards of decorum and diplomatic protocol and precedent. I mean, it's unheard of. But this is the deep state. This is the establishment. This is the State Department and the Defense Department. This is the military industrial complex that runs this country. I don't think most Americans know much about Nord Stream. I don't think they know what it means to the average German. I don't think they know the implications of this geopolitically. And obviously, this was a massive pressure point in this Cold War that's been brewing with the Russian Federation. And taking Nord Stream offline provided a lot more leverage to this Western coalition to continue to maintain the proxy war in Ukraine, and having it still being functional would have given Russia obviously more leverage and ability to negotiate with some European countries. And I think it's a sad. I think it's shameful that the United States continues to treat our European friends and allies as vassal states and as protectorates rather than independent sovereign states. But I also have to blame many of the European governments. I have to blame Brussels. I have to blame Berlin, because they don't stand up for themselves. And I know they're probably under a lot of pressure, but we need to see more leadership on the continent. We need to see people that are willing to buck Washington, buck London, buck Brussels, and chart their own path. We see it with some leaders such as Viktor Orban and a few others who are, leading a sort of national sovereign movement in their countries and standing up for their own, geopolitical interests on the world stage. But, until the United States sees a change in administration, I think we're going to continue to see Washington belittle, bully, and manipulate our European partners. And until Europeans in these various capitals begin to find their own backbone and are willing to stand up for themselves, I think this is going to continue, and we're going to see more things like Nord Stream. I think the AfD coming to power in Germany would certainly change the dynamics substantially, and we will be in a much different position, and we'll be talking about a lot of different things. But none of this is new. We had the Obama the Obama tapes that confirmed with WikiLeaks that they were spying on Merkel and our European allies. I mean, this has been going on for years, and the fact that the Europeans continue to go along with it just goes to show the sad state of affairs in Europe, where you're really not any more of a sovereign country. You're just a vassal state of this hybrid globalist power between the United States and Washington and the European Union in Brussels.
Thank you. Shane?
Well, I would have to agree with Henry Kissinger. It's definitely, U.S., Ukraine, allied, Western powers. I mean, it's clear that, this was an act of terrorism done to hurt Russia. And it shows just how deranged and hypocritical the United States is. You call Russia a terrorist state for their incursion into Ukraine, then they'll do something like this, on the other hand. So it's, do as we say, not as we do. And then we wonder why we don't have credibility in the world, why we're losing all these wars, why people don't want to sign up for the military in the United States anymore, because this hypocrisy is adding up. It shows that in in the what we're doing in terms of foreign policy is alienating people, and the fact that Brussels, the fact that the German government is willing to look the other way and doesn't even really want an investigation into this, that just shows how corrupt these people are, how little they care about the common people, the ordinary people. They're just pawns for this ridiculous and dangerous game of foreign policy that they want to play. They see us as little pieces on a chessboard, and if we go hungry, if we can't heat our homes, then that's a small price to pay for their hegemony, for their agenda. So, and it only helps groups like AFD, because you can take the message that we want this investigated, we care about this sort of thing. We're not going to look the other way. We're not going to take the people and say that your needs are secondary to this needs of this global elite that are rich, and they don't care about the people. They are completely in their own bubble, and we can make the case that we're for the people, that we want what's best for the people. So as shameful as this whole situation has been, it's definitely going to be a shot in the arm for you guys. And as the U.S. and their allies overreach more and commit these heinous acts, we can show the people that we're the alternative. We're the only sensible alternative to bring these ridiculous policies to an end.
You said it nicely, Shane. You are the alternative. We are the alternative for Germany. And many German patriots, they have this view, and Gavin already said it, that Germany is occupied by the United States, that we are a vassal state. And, it's very refreshing to hear this actually confirmed from both of you, because you are American patriots. You want the best in the national interests of the United States. So please don't be offended, but as you are patriots, I'm a patriot. How does that fit in with that? Of course, if you want the best for the United States, having a hegemony over the Western world and over Germany, which is very important for control over Eurasia, wouldn't that be also in the Republican interest? And, how you are in favor of a strong United States. So how does that fit with this potential of cooperation, having a more sovereign Germany, a more sovereign Europe?
So I would point out that the elites that are running this sort of geopolitical strategy, that are part of this, this empire building, this American empire, they're post-national elites. They don't care about the national interest of the United States. They see the United States, or what remains of it, as a vehicle to promote their own globalist, elite-driven agenda. I'm certainly an American nationalist. I certainly support the American national interest. And I simply agree with most Americans that, creating a war in Europe and feuding with Russia and creating these divides and vassalizing European states is not necessarily in the American people's best interest. It may certainly be in the interests of a select few American elites who really don't have any relationship to America outside of a few pieces of paper that establish their nationality. But at the end of the day, we're probably going to disagree on some things. I certainly want to raise tariffs on, car imports from Germany, and we can have that dispute. We can have that disagreement. But I think, in the Westphalian system, we need all these countries and these nation states acting in their own best self-interest. That's what created the Western world. That's what led to a ton of the Western world's innovation and prosperity. And I think the formulation of this sort of global empire that sort of stands for nothing, believes in nothing, it's elite driven, it's woke, it's just driven by pure profit motives of a few corporate and oligarchic interests. I don't think that's the American national interest. I just think that the rotting corpse of the American Republic is being used as a vehicle to achieve those ends in the interim. We want to get rid of that, and we want to unite with other like-minded conservatives, populists, nationalists in these different countries. We're certainly going to disagree on some things. Our views are not always going to align, but I think the overall fight that we're in is the shared fight, because we're fighting against the same common enemy right now. And once that common enemy is defeated, then we could go back to maybe bickering over the import tax tariffs and other things like that. But this is minor stuff compared to the sort of systemic and civilizational fight that we're all waging. And I don't believe that the American empire stands for anything that Americans want. I mean, I'm not against empire as a concept, but if it's an empire that's serving a select few at the expense of the many, expense of the heartland, at expense of the regular American people, the working and middle class, the American families, the American small businesses who are struggling under the jackboot of this regime, I see us as victims in the same way as I see the German people as victims when their, energy independence was taken right from under them and they were forced to, pay inflated prices just to heat their homes. I see us as the same group of victims from the same sort of instigators. So it's a sad state of affairs, but I think that's how most people view it on our side of things.
And I think that's where one place I think where we will disagree, Gavin, is I think that having an empire does hurt the people. I think that it's never a good thing when you have ruling elites who are getting involved in other countries. It results in blowback. It results in more people hating us. You look at what's been going on with foreign military interventions in the United States that have been happening over the course of many decades, mostly unbeknownst to the American people. What does that do? When you go into a country, you overthrow their government, you put in a harsh, repressive regime, that creates more disdain toward the American people. That's what motivates people to take up arms against the United States. So it's made us less safe. It has exploded our debt. The debt is on the backs of the American people. And, yes, corporate interests get richer. Yes, government gets more powerful and they get more prestigious. They grow the bureaucracy in Washington, D.C. But what's happening to the ordinary American people? They're getting put in the meat grinder. They get killed in these wars for nothing that advance no practical purpose for the American people and their safety. They come back home. They develop drug addictions. They become suicidal. It just contributes to the immense cultural rot that's going on in the United States. So, and we have enough natural resources here to become the greatest country without relying on any other countries, without having to intervene in any other countries, without having to tell other countries what to do. So there's no practical reason for us to have an empire, and I'm against the concept completely. In general. So let's focus on putting America first. Let's secure the border. Let's do what's best for our people. Let's harvest our natural resources. Then we'll be the #1 country in the world, just like we were during the Golden Age when America rose as a world power. We didn't have a global empire. I don't think we had a central bank. So let's just rely on the ingenuity of the American people. Let's let the Germans be Germans. Let's let the Russians be Russians. And let's focus on solving our problems in America. Let's bring the troops home. Let's not have all these military bases. We don't need the CIA. We don't need the deep state. Let's get back to what made America great in the first place, and that's having a republic, not an empire.
That's very nicely said. You're making me an American patriot already. We are a little bit over time, but this is, for me personally, this has been such an interesting discussion. And there are two questions which I cannot not ask you. So just going to continue because I want to ask those two questions. One of them is, the digital platforms such as Meta, Facebook, and so on, Twitter, TikTok. They are the new lords of the postmodern world. They are our overlords because they have the power. They censor conservative views and any views in general which are not approved by the establishment. They shadow ban conservatives. They re-educate the youth. They absolutely violate the freedom of speech, the First Amendment. And that's why I would like to ask you, because this is for me such an important issue. This is the new power in the modern world. And what did the Republicans in Congress and what did Trump already do to curtail the misuse of this immense power by the digital giants? And in your opinion, what should be done in the future to control those giants? Shane, please, if you might start.
Well, I mean, I don't think Trump did enough. I mean, I know he issued some executive orders. He really called them out. but not enough. And then Republicans in Congress, they're all owned by big tech. They'll go up there and have a dog and pony show hearing and not really do much of anything, just offer fluff, offer lip service, and then go back to being bought off by the big tech giants, unfortunately. But what really needs to be done is needs to be a utility. The need to be regulated like a utility, and that way, there's free access, so that there's
I'm sorry, like a utility, you mean like an infrastructure, right?
Or just like it's regulated, yes, like AT&T, or because there's a phone company can't throw you off of your phone just because you're saying the wrong things or doing wrong speak while talking to someone on the phone. So that needs to be like that with social media companies as well. That's the reform that is needed. So that, oh my.
Well, he has some technical issues, Shane. Maybe Gavin, if you can continue.
Big tech took him out. He was speaking too much truth to power. They had to cut the video.
Exactly.
I fully agree with Shane. I want to separate a few things. First and foremost, the Republicans writ large have been very weak on this issue, and I think this is because they've largely been captured by this sort of free market absolutism. They're not pragmatic. They're sticking to like this very rudimentary view of the market and market forces, and it's extremely pro-business in a sense. Not really even pro-market, pro-business. And I think because of that sort of corporate influence, they've sort of been muted as an effective force to counter big tech and their consolidation of power and narrative formation in the public square. I think it's extremely dangerous to a free society to have a few select entities and institutions have so much control over the public discourse and dialogue in a society. We've never had this before. And I think they've largely been a beneficiary of certain statutes and regulations already on the books. Section 230, I mean, really basically protects them from liability and litigation in a lot of senses. I mean, that's an easy thing you could start with to reform. But I also agree with Shane more broadly. I think we need a regulatory framework that's akin to how utilities and phone lines are regulated to take care of social media, and that they can't simply censor and it's moved beyond censorship now. Censorship is sort of the rudimentary thing that they do. What they really do now, it's algorithmic. It's how they suppress voices and elevate voices using the algorithm, and you can't really see it. You can't really quantify it or really tell you how it's happening unless you see the source code or whatever's going on behind the scenes. And that's how they're really manipulating public discourse and the public perception of reality. And I think that's extremely dangerous. So I think there's a lot of things that need to be done. I think the regulatory, legal, and judicial framework surrounding big tech and social media is not really up to speed. It's not really up to date. And I think Republicans need to be very strong on this issue, and they need to drop the free market absolutism and approach this from a more pragmatic point of view and understand that unless we get this under control, it's going to be a massive detriment to our free society, and it's certainly going to be an electoral detriment to Republicans themselves. And we've seen this in the past. It's certainly election interference, and I would like to see a Republican Party that's willing to crack down on big corporate entities when warranted, which is basically our tradition going back to Teddy Roosevelt. This is nothing new. Breaking up the monopolies, breaking up the trusts. This is something in the Republican legacy, the Republican history. We should return to that. We're still capitalists. We're still pro-free market. We still want to support small businesses, but I think we need to separate these entities, these large corporate entities, which have merged with the state. And we've seen that big tech has merged with the state, with the intelligence apparatus, to come after Americans, to come after their political opponents. And this is not a matter of the free market anymore. We're dealing with a much more insidious threat, and we need to respond accordingly.
Thank you. Shane, are you with us still, or did the big corporations throw you out? Well.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, great. Gavin, is there something more you would like to add on this question?
On the social media question, I mean, look, I think broadly the Republican Party needs to move to a populist mode of economics that puts the American family, the American worker ahead.
Wait, Gavin, that's great. Just 1 second before you answer this, because that was actually the last question I wanted to pose, and you will see why I said stop there for a second, because I have to give a short introduction for you to better understand this question. In the German AfD party, which I represent, especially among the youth, the youth is always the driver of new ideas, of discussions, more than the older people, more established politicians. And then among the AfD youth, there are two wings. Yeah, I would say they're not very different from each other, but there's this discussion, there's this debate. One wing is they are more adherents of what we call the conservative revolution. So they are in support of a strong state. They are etatists. They are in support of a strong identitarianism and motion, what they call solidarian patriotism, solidarischer Patriotismus. So really against capitalism, again in favor of the working man, of the social part of the social market economy, you know, social welfare state. And then the other wing is goes more in direction of libertarianism, you know, adherents of the Freiburg School, or the liberalism is called, of the social traditional German social market economy from the 1950s, of Austrian economics. And there's like, they're both patriots. I'm more part of the Austrian part, to be honest with you, but you know, we are both patriots, and we both want the best for our country. But we argue on those issues, how to best achieve it. And I'm quite interested because what you said, Gavin, was a perfect introduction for this question. Is there a similar debate within the Republican Party, you know, and in particular, this question, which I'm very fond of understanding, is, you know, is capitalism, is free market, are those concepts or ways of doing things, are they contradictory to conservative values? Are they contradictory to having a traditional family? Are they, capitalism and free market, contradictory to having a nation state, to being religious? Are they contradictory to the working man, you know, the small businesses, the somewheres, as they're called by David Goodhart? Now, I think this is a very important issue, and Trump has touched on this issue with his, you know, his new way of saying things and doing things. What is your view on this? You know, especially because, you know, for Germans, the United States is the country which made capitalism great, you know, and so please, Gavin.
Yeah, no, look, I come from a similar background. You know, I've read all the works of the Austrian, School of Economics, you know, whether it's, von Mises or Rothbard, you know, and me and Shane come from a similar background. So I understand the Austrian business cycle theory, and I agree with much of it. I think at the end of the day, we have to understand that the free market is a means to an end. It's not an end in and of itself. And that the version of the world and the version of, you know, an economic policy that I would like to see enacted, and I think most populists would like to see enacted, would be far freer than what we have now. Would be far less corporatized. It would be far less regulated. You know, it would be far less taxed. You know, I want to shift the revenue burden from taxes on people and corporate and businesses to, you know, tariffs. I want to, you know, destroy the administrative state. I want to reduce regulations, reduce bureaucracy. But, you know, despite having all of that, there are a few areas where I think it's important to be pragmatic and flexible and understand that there is a role for government, and that you're never going to have the sort of utopia that some of these libertarian writers, you know, theorize. I think that's really an ideal. I don't think it's actually something that could come about in a concrete sense. And I think if you want that kind of free market, radical society where there's very little government, you need a society, you need a culture that's enabled to inoculate it. And we don't have that culture or society anymore. Maybe we had it at the country's founding. We had a strong family, we had a strong church, we had a very strong, tight-knit communities, we had strong borders, we had a strong concept of citizenship. All of that stuff has been eroded. So if you really want to return to a place where you can sort of have this Jeffersonian or even Jacksonian sort of like agrarian free market society, this ideal, you know, little world, which all sounds well and good on paper, you're going to need to return to a place in time where we still have a concept of a nation, where we still have a concept of citizenship and borders, and we still have a concept of God and the family and all these basic traditions and institutions that make that free market possible. Otherwise, the free market, in the absence of all these things, it leads to the sort of hedonistic, woke, nihilistic hellhole that we're seeing emerge through much of the West, where you see the birth rates collapse, where you see multiculturalism run rampant, where you see the destruction of our institutions, where you see the destructions of our liberties and freedoms, where everything is worshipped on the altar of the GDP above all. I think, you know, I could still be a capitalist. I could still be pro free market, while understanding that, I think some large corporate entities have gotten too big and they need to be taken care of. And then while we need to have, a trade policy that actually protects American workers, I think you could believe in these things and them not be opposed to each other. I think we need to be flexible, pragmatic, and have a little nuance and understanding that these things, they exist in a real world. They exist outside the world of just theories and theorems and charts with supply and demand. I mean, these are all things that sound very good on paper and sound good in a classroom, and it's important to understand them as a basic knowledge and understanding. But we also have to understand that in the real world, it's far more complex, it's far more gray, it's not so black and white, and we need to be able to have, we're always going to have government. I don't believe in this sort of, anarcho-capitalist utopia that some people have talked about. I don't think it's ever existed. I don't think it can exist. I think the state is inevitable. It's always going to emerge, but you can make that state, you can mold that state in a way for the best interests of the people, society, culture, and traditions that you wish. The left understands that. They mold the state to comport with their twisted worldview. We need to mold the state and wield power to comport with our worldview. And our worldview would be still largely a free market society. I think small businesses would be flourishing. I think it would be very easy to start a family, to own a home, to live off one income, to control inflation, to have people without a college education have a good blue collar job where they can support themselves and their families. All of these things existed in the last 50, 60, 100 years. We want to return to that. And, in many cases, the America that we want to return to is an America that existed, for most of our history, is an America that existed, from the Gilded Age up until like the 1950s. I mean, are we going to claim that we didn't have a free market in the 1880s when we had high tariffs? Are we going to claim that we didn't have a free market in the 1900s when we busted a few trusts or we regulated the meat supply to make sure there weren't toxins in our meat? No one's going to make that claim. In fact, the country was far freer from an economic system point of view back then than it is today. I think today we have this rent-seeking empire in DC where all these corporate interests, all these special interests, they write the laws, they write the regulations, and they create an environment in terms of a regulatory environment that doesn't benefit the market, it benefits them. And I think a lot of these Republicans masquerading as free marketeers, as these people defending capitalism, they're not defending the market. They're not pro-market, they're pro-business. And it's very distinct difference. They're supporting interests that are beneficial to a select class, a select tier of businesses and their leaders. They're not supporting interests that are, business neutral, but pro-market, which could mean, people rise and fall with the whims of, the people and the market at large. They don't want that. They want the government to step in to protect entrenched wealth and entrenched business interests. And I think going against that doesn't make me anti-capitalist. I think it makes me pro-capitalist. So that was a long, winding answer. I apologize.
And
that's true. Please, strong market or strong state or free market, or strong state and free market.
Yeah, I think what we need is, definitely need a free market. I don't support government intervention into the economy other than maybe in some sort of emergency or very limited basis. But what I think you need a strong state for is to make sure that leftists don't infiltrate every sector of your society and turn it inside out. When you have, these social freedoms, and when you allow leftists to organize, their ideology is like a cancer, and it will rot your society from the inside out. So you cannot allow this sort of communist subversion. Look at what has happened in America, probably all throughout the world, is that these leftists did their long march through the institutions. They infiltrated every institution. They made it so that not just they didn't want to just take over the state. They wanted to destroy the family. They wanted to destroy religion. They have infiltrated every sector of society, and while Americans were sleeping. So this sort of subversion cannot be allowed. That's why you need state force, is to make sure that leftists cannot control these different organizations, and that this is sort of thing is rooted out. The left always says that we cannot tolerate far right ideology because it's so evil, it's so corrosive. We must stomp it out with the state. Well, apply that to the inverse. That really applies to Marxism and the left. And when you allow these people to go on unabated, your society will crumble and your families will be ripped apart, and Christianity and all true faith will be destroyed. They'll turn your kids transgender just so that they can control them easier and make them their foot soldiers. So we're seeing the end game of that, and there will be state power that will be needed to end leftist treachery and save our civilization. No doubt about it. Regardless of where we are on the spectrum, if you're ideological spectrum, if you're more libertarian, if you can see what's going on with the left, you need to understand that we're not going to be able to just preach the non-aggression principle and say how great free markets are to these people and change them. No, they're going to need to be defeated, and that will have to be done through the state or otherwise.
And you are arguing like a real follower of Carl Schmitt, and his criticism of liberalism. So he said also that you have to divide between friend and enemy, and you have to identify the enemy, as you just did. And he criticized the libertarians. We call them liberals in Germany, you call them libertarians in the United States, but basically he said that this non-aggression idea of a peaceful society is impossible if there are enemies of this society, the left-wingers. So I agree with you absolutely. I absolutely agree with Gavin. We talked a whole hour, and I'm absolutely do not regret it in 1 second because it was so interesting. But before we start now, I would like to ask you and give you like a small task. I would like to ask each of you to give a small statement for our German viewers, supporters of the AfD voters, AfD members who are listening, who are watching, and who will watch this video in the future. And can you try to make it in less than a minute so you can make a TikTok video out of it? So what would you like to say to German AfD supporters? Shane, please, if you can start.
Stand strong. Be very encouraged about what's going on throughout the entire world. There is a movement in every nation similar to yours, and we are united, and we will all be successful in the end. This empire is crumbling. The call it whatever you want, globalist new world order. What they're doing is failing. It's becoming hated throughout the world, and we will rise on the ashes of this new world order. So stay strong. Get out there. Hit doors. Meet new people, recruit new people. We are rising, they are falling, and we will win in the end.
Wonderful. Thank you. Gavin.
You have friends in the United States. You have friends supporting you. Realize that the fight that you're facing in Germany, in Berlin, and wherever is a very similar fight to what we're facing in the United States and broadly in the Western world. That you should ignore the noise, you should ignore the attacks, and you should keep working and building methodically towards creating a party and an institution that can last for the next few generations, and that could certainly enter into the halls of power in Germany and bring about a national rejuvenation and push off sort of the globalist, elitist attacks that have been destroying much of the Western world. And don't be drowned out in petty internal feuds and fighting and internal factionalism. That's how they're going to destroy you and your movement. But continue to build, continue to speak truth to power, and continue to unite everyday Germans and regular working people against the institutions that are seeking to put us all in poverty and put us all in chains.
Wonderful. Well, Gavin, Shane, it was really amazing for having you, because I asked you quite difficult questions, and I'm very grateful that you answered those questions. Those questions were very important to German patriots, and it's wonderful to have such amazing friends and freedom fighters who share our views, share our ideology, our aims and goals. And I'm sure that with such friends in the United States, we will be successful. The conservatives, the right-wingers will be successful. They will own the future and make the future more free for our children and make it a happier and more peaceful place. And I'm looking forward. I wish you the utmost success in the United States for the presidential elections. I'm wishing Donald J. Trump to become the second time the United States president again, and to make America finally great again. I wish you both the utmost success, and thanks again for having you as allies. You are true allies of Germany in that sense. And I'm very grateful. Thank you for the discussion.
Thank you, sir. Have a good one.
Thank you. Okay, guys, I